Hello again. The weakening rand spells more bad news for South Africans and Eskom. As we have another fuel price hike on the cards from Wednesday. Another steep rise that will see both petrol and diesel going up by well over R2 extra per litre. While the GDP grew by 1.9% in the first quarter of this year, we also got news that Moody's ratings agency upgraded our investment rating to stable, giving a little bit of hope in the darkness. However, Eskom's inability to supply electricity does not bode well for business and investment. So what kind of impact will Eskom's problems have on investment and growth? Can we steer ourselves out of a collision course? Let's discuss this and other questions now with Mike Rossouw. He's an independent energy expert joining us live via Zoom from Bangkok in Thailand. And Alan Mukoki, he's the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Mukoki and Mr. Rossouw, good afternoon. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time this hour. Just looking at what's happening this week with the rise in fuel prices and the problems we're having with Eskom load shedding, the cost of energy has gone up quite a bit. Mr. Mukoki, from a business perspective, what does this mean? I mean, you're paying more. Businesses are going to be paying more.
Well, thanks, Bradan, and thanks for the invite to speak in your program. You know, it's a very serious problem, the issue of energy. As you recall, it's got a very compounding effect on the overall cost of business, of doing business. You are dealing with the issue of the lack of availability of that energy, which means your production schedule or timelines are actually significantly impacted and interrupted. There are orders that you're supposed to meet. You're not able to meet them because you don't have consistency of power in your overall operation. And then on the other side, of course, the costs are going up all the time, you know, diesel, everything else, inflation, interest rates. And when that starts to happen, it's going to have a very adverse impact on jobs because quite clearly, if you're not making money on the other side because people are paying less or don't have the ability to buy products and services, they are going to have to reduce because they themselves have got cash flow constipation in terms of their own income levels. And therefore, the economy is going to suffer significantly from all these matters when they all come together.
Yeah, the role of energy in our economy cannot be overstated at the moment. Mr. Rossouw, Eskom currently does not seem to have a solution, or are we being overly impatient as South Africans?
Well, firstly, we're not being impatient, and nobody should be impatient about this. Eskom have failed us abysmally. And so to put it into perspective, let's just cut out what it's not. It's not a load problem. There is no load problem in South Africa. I'm going to say it again. A no load problem at all. The problem is 100% Eskom's problem. And the fundamental problem at Eskom is they do not have the resources to handle even half the work that they currently have. Their breakdowns alone are consuming more resources than they have provided for. And the worst thing is they do repairs, but the repairs break down immediately thereafter or shortly thereafter because they were not done incomplete or they were done in a rush or whatever. That leaves us with maintenance, which is virtually non-existent. And when they do take machines out for maintenance, it's invariably more than double the time than that was supposed to be because they don't have the spares, they don't have the resources, the manpower, etc., etc. I've told them once, I've told them twice, I've told them 1,000 times, I've told the Minister of Finance, I've told everybody who's asked me, tell Eskom to cut out the old power stations and send those resources, those people, to the bigger power stations and focus their attention on that. And that may start solving the problem. But we're 5 years away from it. The bottom line is Eskom have long gone past a turning point where they're currently going downhill. I predicted this months and months ago, and I told everybody who asked me that we are going to go way beyond load shedding 2. We're now sitting at 6. I can tell you very shortly they're going to be asked for load shedding at 8. And just so that you know, the reason Eskom are asking for load shedding, they have less than 50% available capacity at any time than they need. So the only solution that they have, and which they're using frequently, is to shut you and I down by means of load shedding. There's the problem. It's destroying the economy. It's destroying the country. We are going downhill. Quite frankly, I say the country is burning. It's burning itself to death. Businesses are closing. They don't have the finances to fund for the generators in the stores that they rent or whatever the case may be. So South Africa is burning.
South Africa is
finished.
Politicians
are doing nothing. Yeah. Politicians are doing nothing. They're sitting still on their hands, waiting for Eskom. Eskom are doing nothing either.
So with nobody doing anything, that can't be good for business. If the country, as you say, Mr. Rossouw, is burning, Mr. Mukoki, I mean, your members, you represent dozens of businesses as a chamber of commerce and industry. What are they thinking? What do they think will be a solution? Because like this, in a country that's allegedly burning, according to Mr. Rossouw, who want to come and invest here?
Well, I think that we have to confront the big gorilla in terms of how we govern things, in terms of how we manage SOEs. It's not just a question of Eskom. Significant problems are showing up in the infrastructure space as well, around rail, around how we're able to move things from South Africa when we export them. I think that there's a fundamental problem, and we need to go back into investigating the root causes of why we have these kinds of problems. Otherwise, 5 years, 10 years down the road, we'll end up having exactly the same problems. I think that we've maintained a very clear position as a South African chamber that everything starts with governance. It starts with people, it starts with culture, it starts with values. So at a certain level of this engagement, we need to sit down and say, well, as South Africans, we know what is the problem. The problem is people. And if you start with people, you've got to start all the way at the top. In other words, are we being over-ambitious when we expect people who themselves have never had any significant executive experience or leadership experience in these kinds of areas to be sitting in a room together within the limitations of their own capabilities and deciding that they should put together a board when they themselves don't know how to put together a board? In other words, I'm saying, whilst there are many...
So there's a leadership issue. There's a leadership issue.
Absolutely, it's a leadership issue, starting with who is appointing the boards and how the boards themselves are appointing the people who are going to run the structure, and the fixing of the environment and the ecosystem around everything else that requires an Eskom to actually be successful. And I don't think that we should sketch that particular issue. We've come so far now. We know that this is a very serious problem. We've called, for instance, in the past for a JSC-type structure, a Judicial Services Commission-type structure, to look at the appointment of non-executive directors to SOE boards, and therefore for those particular boards to be totally independent in terms of how they put together the executive management.
But we're here now, Mr. Mukoki, yeah, we're here now. That has not happened. That's your proposal.
There's no here now.
Nobody...
There's no here now, Dan. There isn't. There is a long-term problem. There is no short-term solution of how you're going to fix the problem, because you've caused long-term problems. You are going to have to sit down and say, I want permanent solutions. Otherwise, we're going to end up having the same situation since 2008. Every 2 years, we fix the problem. It keeps coming back at us as though we don't actually appreciate what is the problem.
So in the long term, in the long run, Mr. Mukoki, then we need a change of leadership. So Andre de Ruyter and the team must go. The Eskom board must go. Yeah, Mr. Rossouw, what are your thoughts about this leadership thing? You said earlier politicians are sitting there doing nothing. Eskom is doing nothing. Should they all go? Do we need to a new broom? We need a new leadership.
What we don't need is to now discharge the current Eskom executive and ECO. Those are good managers. They've been in management positions for all their lives. But I'm afraid their knowledge of the utility, and especially Eskom, which is a very complex organization, is lacking. So they're, excuse me, they're relying on information from the bottom up to tell them what's going on and what they must do, and they're getting the wrong information continuously, and they cannot query it and they cannot challenge it. So that's where they're coming from. The fundamental leadership. But
then why? Sorry, Mr. Rossouw, why should they stay if they are not qualified, if they don't understand the information they are getting from bottom? Surely you need people who are competent, who understand the energy sector. I listened to Dr. Roel Khoza this weekend in a special focus eNCA produced, talking when he was chairman of Eskom many years ago in the 90s. He said the people around the board had diverse skills, but they understood understood the energy sector. They understood how Eskom should operate. So why should they stay if they don't understand it, the current lot?
Look, I was there. Roel Khoza had a privilege in that he dealt with a very healthy Eskom that had no breakdowns as the current levels are and maintenance backlog as the current level is. So Roel Khoza doesn't actually know what he's talking about in the current situation. I can tell you right now, frankly, if they get rid of the Rata and his CEO, they have no clue and they will not get anybody to replace them because those are competent managers. The problem is they're lacking the experience within the utility, and there they need the manpower and the leadership below them to come up to the top. And take a guess, half the leadership below them have left Eskom because of the previous Eskom leadership in itself that got rid of them. In particular, Machela Koko and his CEO. So firing anybody at Eskom now solves no problems. We've just got to get down to the basics. I can tell you fairly and squarely, 100% without blinking an eye, the biggest problem in leadership lies fairly and squarely from the president through the whole Eskom ANC executive, the ANC executive. They have failed the country, not only in Eskom, in every single state utility currently is burning. And in terms of business, I can tell you quite frankly now, the economy is not on its knees, it's on its arse. 100%, it's on its arse already. We will not see investment in South Africa now or in the future until these issues are addressed.
That's very hard.
From the president down.
Yeah, that's very hard. I think we have to face the reality that we're in trouble. But, I mean, the economy is is in the doldrums. Mr. Mukoki, you've mentioned leadership. Mr. Rossouw agrees that there's a leadership issue, but he says it's the level below the executive and the board, the people who should be in the know. So that's one aspect. But currently, the economy needs to move. The economy needs to grow. We need to attract investments. We need to create those jobs. Eskom is a key cog in that wheel. So in the long term, yes, there are issues to be addressed. But in the short to medium term, what's the thought of your members as a chamber? What can be done?
Well, you know, when we make an argument such as you need to have the correct structure that will choose a board of directors and enable that board of directors to be choosing the executives, that's not long term, that's short term. That's something you can do tomorrow. To say we're rebasing this whole thing. You need a complete total reset because it's not going to be resolved. You can change the junior people. As long as you're not actually changing the governance structure, nothing is actually going to happen. We don't have an Eskom problem. We've got an energy problem. Now, when you start to look at this problem as an energy crisis, you start to require a leadership competence level that says, I'm going to look at the totality of the whole thing, not the self-interest of Eskom, not the self-interest of cabinet, not an idea of being dogmatic about preserving that which I think I have because I want to own it. It actually belongs to me. We need people who can think very differently about what needs to happen to Eskom today, not in the medium or long term. And it starts with leadership. It starts with how you do the governance. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the executive of Eskom. Absolutely, I don't know. Because they may just well be the competent people, but they don't have the right ecosystem, the right governance structure that can enable them to succeed. And that's one of the fundamental aspects of what can be resolved very, very, very quickly.
Okay, finally, as we conclude, Mr. Rossouw, just one other thing that could be fixed to assist us. You say the economy, I'm quoting you, is on its ass, which means we're really in the doldrums. We are in trouble. We need investment. We need growth. Eskom plays a role. What else do you think can be done? Very briefly, as we conclude, Mr. Rossouw.
The main issue is the ANC, in particular the government, starting with the president, have plans aplenty. Nobody implements these plans. So the one thing that has to be done is the government have to relook at the plans that exist. They are very good ones, and action those plans and make them happen. They've not done that. They've failed. They ask for more plans, more commissions, another plans, a commission upon a commission to look at another commission. Then they ask for a plan to look at a plan that's failed, and planning. But bugger all is done about implementation and doing what the plan says. That's what we need to do right away. Okay.
Final word to you, Mr. Mukoki, from a business perspective?
Oh, no, I agree with Mike, absolutely. That's where the key is. You need to be able to drive a meritocracy, put in the right people who are going to actually deliver on the right plans that are there. Everything starts there. And there's nothing else that you can do about that because Eskom is going to be around if we keep it around for the next 50 years. But if we have the right people and with the right governance structure, with the right systems in there, then we can solve this problem and do so permanently.
Thank you very much. That's Mr. Alan Mukoki, CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also Mike Rossouw, an independent energy expert, joining us online all the way from Bangkok in Thailand. There you have it. It's a leadership question. We need to reset immediately. You don't have to wait for too long, and put people who are competent and capable, who understand what is happening. The current executive may well be the right executive at Eskom, but what lies below might be a challenge. And there are lots of good plans around. We need to implement them.